Hello and welcome to week 8. We are in our third week of guest lectures, and this week I'm really excited for this one, Cheyenne Sundance from Sundance Farm. So basically this week we're really talking about food justice and health and ways that we do or do not have access to food and how that shapes our health and ways that our food system is structured and what all comes down from there. So I'm going to start with a quick sort of introduction overview. Wanted to say a couple things about the next part of your capstone project. And then there are a few pieces this week. So we put together a piece from Cheyenne. So we went to the farm with a crew to do some filming with Cheyenne, and then also a couple of other pieces thinking about terminology and ways we can think about ways food shapes our health and wellness. So let's jump in. As always, I'll start with a land acknowledgement. So we recognize our presence on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tekaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. It is now home to many Indigenous nations and peoples. We acknowledge the current treaty holders and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In this territory, as we all are, we are all treaty people, are subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. So I wanted to just share an account that I love to follow, Notorious Cree on Instagram, and they did a really great post on land acknowledgement. So I just wanted to show this quickly. You're gonna have to click it on your own. It's not working in this new format that I'm using, which is a presentation within Canva. So you can click on that and watch the piece that Notorious Cree did with some really beautiful dancing. So I just wanted to pull your attention to this post by Black Creek Community Farm, which some of us visited in person and all of us visited in some way, whether it was online. And so they did a really great post on kind of an introduction to food justice. So what does it mean to use the words food justice? How does that orient our thinking in different ways? How does that orient our calls to action in different ways? What kind of action are we asking for? Very much the discussions have been around like food banks and ways that people can access food in that way, and kind of that charity band-aid sort of model, but that's not getting at the structural pieces, right? So that's what we're really trying to pay attention to in this course. And so really kind of understanding what the language is, what the landscape looks like, what people are asking for is our work in this course. So I'll ask you to flip through and just see what Black Creek Community Farm, what kind of public education they're doing around food justice. So as I mentioned, I'm really excited this week. I got to go visit Cheyenne's farm. It's just right over here at the corner of Keel and Shepherd. I can walk there from my house. And she's got a really awesome urban farm there. Ways that she's thinking about her place in the food system, her work as a young Black femme farmer, and ways that, just her visioning for how she sees her work, where her work is, what it looks like. I would love for each of you to be able to go. I encourage you to follow her on Instagram. She does all kinds of really great posts, all kinds of public education stuff around farming, and what that looks like, what her farm looks like, what her model of the way that she runs her farm looks like. And also, she sometimes has open houses, so you could go on a little tour. We get our seedlings from her. So last year we picked up tomatoes and I think eggplants and some herbs, and honestly they were the best. There's these little pink bumblebee tomatoes that were amazing. My kids would just go and eat them right off the vine. So yes, I'm excited to welcome Cheyenne this week to be able to talk to us about her work in farming. And so each of us kind of thinking about our own relationship to food, ways that we can or cannot access food, ways that food and our relationship to food shapes who we are, whether we're healthy or not. So just kind of thinking about the ways that policy structures food, and ways that you can engage in this kind of work if you're interested. So one of the pieces that I just find so interesting from Cheyenne's work is this piece that she does around growing in the margins. And so thinking about your capstone project, your second part is due next week, and that's about the community kind of piece. And so I wanted to think about Cheyenne's work doing growing in the margins, mentorship work as an intervention. And so basically, she runs a free 12-week urban agriculture program that's located at her farm for youth in the margins. So BIPOC, queer, youth with disabilities, who would like to gain experience and education in urban farming. So one of the things, so she runs it 12 weeks and you kind of get all of the training in all of the different areas. And so really thinking about her work and the ways that, she's a business owner, she runs a farm, she, it makes money, that's her career, her job, and then also runs this kind of piece out of the farm to say, what are the ways that we can change food production? So not just about sort of the ways that we can access food, but who's actually determining what food is grown and where that's grown, and who's growing that matters, right? So her work, she's young, like many of you. She's in her 20s and had this beautiful vision and has made it work. So I just think it's she's a really great person to kind of learn from and engage with. And so if you're interested in thinking more about this, and this is someone and you identify from one of these groups, I really do urge you to connect and see whether you could enroll in the Growing in the Margins program. So she does it, I think, a couple times a year. So there'll be different intakes. So just to end, before we move on to the next pieces of the lecture, I just drew out a couple more ways that communities are pushing back as you're thinking about interventions, way folks are intervening, building new futures. So here there's a link to a Twitter thread from the Black Medical Students Association of U of T. They came up with an unofficial guide to Canadian medical school. So all of that they brought together a whole group of medical students who wrote, like, what do you need to know in order to get into med school? How do you write your applications? Who do you need to connect with? All of that kind of hidden information that folks don't always have access to. So you can access that there and think about that in terms of an intervention if you're thinking in kind of around racial justice and who makes up our medical professional field. Second one, in the bottom left-hand corner, Leah Lakshmi's work on care web, so experiments in collective care. So if you're thinking about sort of disability, intersections of ableism and care, and ways that folks are received or not received, cared for or not cared for in the system, Leah's work is so amazing. I really encourage you to go there and think about and see what she's sort of thinking about and creating and building. And then the last piece is Doctors for Defunding the Police, who started there you can see they joined Twitter April 2020, so kind of, pandemic times when we started to see a real larger conversations around defunding the police and what that means. And so these are all doctors, BIPOC doctors committed to health and thinking about ways that policing and health actually don't go together, and thinking about policing as a public health crisis. And so we're going to think about this more in week 10 when we welcome Andrea, who's a community organizes for getting cops out of school. They've won a bunch of campaigns where they've been able to get cops out of schools at the elementary or high school level. And so thinking about, she'll be talking about that work. And so yeah, this is another great follow for social media if you're wanting to think in these ways, think about abolition in healthcare and ways that folks are organizing. So those are just some places I wanted to draw your attention to as you're thinking about your second part of your capstone project. So I will now hand it over. There's a few pieces, as I said, that will make up this lecture. So you're going to watch a couple of videos, read a couple threads, and then that really great lecture from Cheyenne. So enjoy.
My name is Cheyenne Sundance. I'm the farm director of Sundance Harvest. Sundance Harvest is a year-round organic vegetable farm here in Toronto, Ontario. It's a mix of field-based farming, so farming right into the soil, and it's also greenhouse farming. So we have 2,000 square feet greenhouses that are heated, which we grow lots of vegetables in the wintertime. The type of vegetables we grow are things like greens and garlic and squash, and we also grow mushrooms, which is super fun and a really exciting new venture that we're trying out. I started Sundance Harvest because when I was around, I would say 1920, I did a lot of traveling, I saw a few farms, and I knew I wanted to work within a green sector and work within the earth-based kind of field. But I couldn't find one farm that had all the aspects of really what I was looking for in a farm. So that paid their employees, that didn't do unpaid internships because that's exploitation of labor, that had a really good racially diverse workforce, and that also provided opportunities to grow within the business of farming. So because I couldn't find any opportunities that fit that bill, I just created my own opportunity, and I started Sundance Harvest. And I did start this farm so I could have a really amazing community space for people that look like me and have similar life experiences to get the chance to have a career in agriculture. I will say when I started Sundance Harvest, it was very difficult to break into a very white and male-dominated field of farming. That was probably one of the hardest barriers I had to overcome, simply not having a mentor that looked like me and constantly being undervalued for the work I brought into agriculture in itself. And to really break those barriers, just existing is a really big thing. Representation in agriculture with Black women or other women of color, being there and doing the work and producing amazing vegetables and then a lovely CSA and all that stuff is awesome by itself. And I've actually decided to do more policy-based work. And I'm on the board of the National Farmers Union of Ontario. And right now, I've actually pushed an amendment federally across the National Farmers Union to start the very first BIPOC Advisory Committee in Canada. So that means I can do work all across Canada, ensuring that BIPOC farmers have better representation and also funding for the work that they do. So food justice, I consider Sundance Harvest to be a food justice farm. The first thing, Sundance Harvest by itself is a for-profit farm, which I have to do that to pay my employees. And the second, we have a nonprofit arm called Growing in the Margins. And Growing in the Margins, I would say, is what the food justice element of Sundance Harvest is. Because within that program, youth 18 to 25 who are BIPOC, who otherwise would not have any opportunity to really gain knowledge in agriculture in a space that they have peers that look like them, they have teachers that look like them. We have that space four times a year in every season. And the aspect of Growing the Margins isn't so much donation or charity based, it's actually giving them the knowledge and education. Because if I give them the knowledge and education, it's literally giving them a packet of seeds. They can grow it how they want and they can do whatever they want with it. So food justice is a bit different than food security. Food security is simply like having access to that food. It doesn't have to be culturally relevant food, it doesn't have to be nutritious food, but it's just food. And food justice is understanding that people should have access to culturally relevant food, nutritious food, food nearby them, community gardens, local farms, but also opportunities to have their own autonomy within the food system and make their own decisions. And really the latter part of that is what Growing in the Margins is trying to do. So what nourishes me within Sundance Harvest is I get to have really the best of both worlds. I run the for-profit farm where I get to hire many youth of color who otherwise wouldn't be able to be in an environment that Sundance Harvest has, a very beautiful, femme, BIPOC, fun environment. And I get to grow amazing food with them all and then sell the food to all of my community. And then the next piece that really nourishes me is Growing in the Margins. I get to do amazing work within the nonprofit sector that does allow the next generation of farmers to get the education that they need here on site. They get to put their hands in the soil, they get to feel a broad fork in their hand, they get to harvest that broccoli and learn along the way with their peers. And I think what nourishes me is knowing that I'm not just doing this for myself, but because I have Growing in the Margins, that has a wider impact on everyone around. typical day on the farm during production season when we're growing, and we're a winter farm, so keep in mind we produce from October to, I would say, June, so not the main season. Looks like I head into work probably around like 10. I don't like waking up early. And I get into work, we usually harvest the first thing we need to. So we harvest greens and then we harvest any other fruiting crops. Right now we're harvesting squash. So we usually harvest squash midday. And in the afternoon we have a lunch as a staff, like a communal lunch. And then we listen to some music and we just do some tasks. It could be packing our CSA boxes for 50 members. It could also be things like preparing garlic seed to plant in the fall coming up. We basically just do usually harvesting and then tasks in the later day. Sometimes we have workshops on the farm, so it's really exciting to have to get the space set up and have all like my fun designs and my artwork set up for the workshops. But usually we have workshops about once every 2 weeks. Sundance Harvest made the decision this year to not be a summer farm, so not produce mainly in June, July, August, September. Instead, what we do is we're a winter farm now. So I know fall and spring isn't the winter, but we focus our production around the winter season. That's our pinnacle production time. And the reason we actually chose that is because of the climate crisis. This year, we were trying to grow a lot of tomatoes and a lot of zucchinis in the greenhouse, and it got up until 55 degrees Celsius. At the 40 degrees Celsius mark, fruits terminate their fruit from the flower. So the flowers actually just started dropping. And one day I went into the greenhouse and the flowers were just scattered across the floor. And to know that and to see that means that I actually can't run a successful and profitable farm and continue paying my staff. So because of that, and because staff literally couldn't work in the greenhouses due to heat exhaustion, we decided to focus on winter farming. And that allows us to, one, ensure our staff are healthy and happy and not getting heat exhaustion every 2 days. And then two, making sure that our profits are stable and regular so I can continue doing this work. So it does suck because who doesn't love, farming in the summer? But at the same time, I get to really understand that the climate crisis is real, and I get to pivot my farming around that to make sure that it's sustainable in the long term. Picturing a just future looks like, in my opinion, things like land trusts and communal land access. Here at the farm, I'm expanding next year to quite a big amount. It's been a long time coming and a lot of work to do so. For the land that I'm going to be farming, 1 acre of it's actually going to be turned into a black incubator farm. When I started out, it was incredibly difficult to actually find the lease that I have now, and I worked really, really hard to ensure that I can continuously stay here. So in the future, I hope people don't have to work as hard as I did because that's no fun. But what I see in the future is things like incubator farms, so new farmers don't have to struggle to find a place to grow, more community gardens, communal land access, and also things like land trusts. So people who purchase land or settlers who have land access, putting that land into a trust for 100 years to ensure that it's not sold to development. And this is really important to note around the greenbelt right now happening in southwestern Ontario. So if you're a first-year university student and you feel like emboldened by this, the easiest thing you can do is actually message your local city councilor and ask them what are they going to do regarding having more urban agriculture or more community gardens. Advocate for that. Make your voice a bit louder for that. The more people sending emails, the more people bringing up urban agriculture, the more it's in the public mainstream and considered an actual real thing that many of us could benefit from in our daily lives. During COVID, I've seen a lot of things shift. I actually started Sundance Harvest here where I am in Downsview Park in September 2019. So I literally had like a couple months before things went woof down the slope. So the majority of this farm has actually been during COVID. And I've noticed a big increase in people wanting to purchase my vegetables and have a CSA, which I can understand people wanting to feel closer to their local food source. Something else I've understood is people want to be connected to nature and the outside and to their environments, and that goes along with health a lot. When you're thinking about mental health and how you feel when you're digging a carrot out of the ground, you feel pretty good most of the time, or at least I feel good most of the time. And I think with farming and Sundance Harvest, people have been very interested in what I do, not just because of the vegetables and my ethos, but also because I'm within an environment and an ecosystem that I believe we all are a part of. And to be so close to the food production, I get to see the patterns and changes of the weather. I get to see how too many grasshoppers can decimate my kale crop. And I also get to feel more connected to the world around me in a different way that I didn't do before the pandemic, when I wasn't so forced to be outside all the time. One thing I would say we need to be paying more attention to post-COVID, or even with COVID, is providing more opportunities for youth. With the climate crisis, I'm 24, so I'm not really considered a youth anymore, but when I was 20 or 18 or something like that, I thought a lot about how the climate crisis would affect me. The COVID pandemic is also affecting youth a lot. There are opportunities where they can move, how they can travel, and how they can learn. So I feel like in the future and right now, the biggest thing I would like to see is more focus on youth and youth care and the youth future and how they can bounce back from this and feel supported. So the easiest way is to encourage outdoor activities and outdoor learning. And I truly think like programs like Growing in the Margins and other programs, other places like Food Share and Black Creek have, are really good because many of the youth that come to my program talk about how beneficial it is to feel like they have options in a time where their only option was staying inside and thinking about the impending doom. So I think just having more options in terms of being outside and also having careers that aren't so, I would say, rigid is something that I think is really cool. When you're starting farming, there's some barriers and there's a journey you're probably going to take. The beginning of the journey is usually going to be things like land access, and that's why Sundance Harvest is working like really hard to provide the incubator farm here next year, but also provide rural land access with our partner farmers. We're releasing an awesome list this winter. But when they start out, they're probably, and when you start out maybe, you're probably going to have a similar journey to me. Maybe you didn't, go to university or college. I didn't. Maybe you didn't really know fully what you wanted to do yet. I didn't. But also maybe you want to work with the land and be involved in a career that will really help mitigate the climate crisis, because farming and agriculture does. You're literally sequestering carbon in the soil with plants' roots. You're growing food so close to home so there's less carbon emissions, and many other things you're doing as well. But what I would say is, I didn't have any formal background, no formal training. I hardly farmed before I started Sundance Harvest. But the biggest journey I had was being the journey of trying. So the easiest thing to do is just really get involved in it and try. Talk to your local farm, ask if they're hiring. Try not to be an unpaid intern, because that will suck. Or even come to Sundance Harvest, maybe be involved in Growing in the Margins or come to our open house. But the journey is probably going to be one of finding land access, getting that education, which is really important to know how to grow that food. And then after that, seeing if you want to do it by yourself or within a community. But the journey isn't as hard as some people think, because farming is many different things. It could be beekeeping, it could be mushroom farming, it could be microgreens, it could be growing on the earth, it can be livestock, chickens. So you can do many different things within agriculture, and just give yourself grace to try them all and see which ones fit for you.